In this particular part 3, we're going to be talking about some of the best practices, some of the how aspects of the material management system. In the previous part 1 and part 2 lessons, we've been talking about why this is so important and what are some of the main tools that we would want to implement. And so in this case, we'll be sharing with you what we've seen in some of North America's best plants in terms of how we engage the workers, the cultural aspects of this material delivery system, and some of the best practices. So with that, let's get started. Best practice number 1, engage the material staff and operations in the material delivery system. So what we're suggesting here is that although in the 21st century there are a lot of cool things that you could do to automate this process and take people out of the equation, actually the best plants want to get people involved in the equation, in the process of managing materials. So for example, you could conceive of some way of completely automating the signal for replenishment and taking people out of the loop. But what we've seen is the best companies want operators to actually have some role in that material replenishment system. In the case of Toyota Material Handling, which we spent quite a lot of time at, they actually use paper Kanban cards. So there's a bin, it has a card on top, and the operator's asked to remove the card when they take the first piece and place that card in a collection box. And in that way, the operator, he or she, is actually looking at the material and taking a physical action to acknowledge, yes, I'm consuming this material, I've signaled to bring more, and so they have a role to play. It's not a huge role, right? We're not asking them to do too much, and we're not asking them to really divert their attention from their primary job, which is to build products, but we are asking them to have a role in this material delivery system. So engaging people in the process, I think, is a key point. And shying away, not being afraid of technology, and not using technology when it's appropriate, but wanting people to actually, human beings to actually be involved in this process. That would be point number 1. Point number 2 that we've noticed, you want to, like Ronald Reagan said, we want to trust but verify. So whenever you have people involved, you do have the potential for error, correct? People can make mistakes, and they do. So you want to make sure you error-proof the process by having checks to make sure everything's going to run as planned. And so let's talk about some of the checks that we've seen. First one is when you ask an operator to take a card and put it in a box, they could not do that, right? They can't really do it wrong, you can just do it. It's kind of a binary thing, do it or not do it, but they're supposed to do it. So what we have here is a team leader or a supervisor that's responsible for collecting the cards from a child box or a collection box near the operator, so the operator's not having to walk a long distance, and they consolidate these cards and place them in a parent box, which is a larger collection box where a material handler or a tugger driver can pick those up as part of the regular replenishment route. So we have one area of check. The team leader or the supervisor can check to make sure those cards are there. So let's take it to the next level. What happens if that team leader does not do his or her job and doesn't actually collect those cards? Well, what we've seen is that the master box has a little switch, and part of the process is you put the cards in that box and you turn the switch on. And that switch sends a signal back to production control, kind of a master control board, that says, yes, those cards have been placed in the box, they're ready for pickup on the next delivery cycle. Now, if that light doesn't get turned on, then that's an opportunity to get on the phone and say, hey, John, Mary, Joe, where are the cards? We haven't seen that light go on. And that's a double check to make sure that this whole signaling system, which is quite manual, to be honest, is running properly. Now, there are a couple other checks we need to have, and this is where some technology could be involved. What happens if a card gets lost? Is there a process in place for that? Well, what we've seen is this is a good opportunity for applying some automation. If each card, each paper card, has a barcode on it that identifies that bin, that quantity, then you have the opportunity to actually scan those cards efficiently and determine if a particular card, so they're serialized in essence, has not been scanned within an expected period of time. And if we notice, or the system notices, again, this can be automated, if the system notices that a card has not been scanned something is going on. And in those cases, there's an audit that's required. In other words, some person, human being, would check on it. Go to that area, where is this bin? We want to track it down. And that happens all the time, right? That kind of automated check. So that's one thing that we're concerned about. Another thing that we're concerned about is what happens when demand changes. We set these quantities of material. They're pretty modest, but if demand for a particular item goes up or goes down, how do we adjust that? And of course, you can do a complete analysis every so often and make adjustments, but it would be better to have something that's more automated, relying on data to do that kind of check and make those kind of adjustments on kind of a routine basis. So that takes me to point number 3 in terms of best practices. What you want to do is automate what makes sense. So we've already established, I think, that the best companies like to have people involved, engaged in this process, but we're also using automation and technology and databases to help manage it as well. So in the case of quantities, for example, what happens is, or what could happen, and I don't think this is too hard, what could happen is when you scan a card, this computer system looks into your ERP or MRP system. And remember, ERP or MRP has a future view of demand. That's how it works. When you create an MRP plan, it's actually looking out in the future for an individual item based on the consolidated demands. So if when we scan a particular card, the system has a little algorithm that looks into the future and then based on certain rules makes a determination, let's reissue this card, right, with the same quantity. Demand has been fairly stable, we don't need to make changes, or we see demand is going up, maybe we need to issue another card, which would be another bin of material. Increase that inventory quantity because we see usage going up, or the reverse, we see demand going down for that item, and maybe we could even put a card to sleep for a while or remove it from the system. So all of this can be automated. You can imagine what kind of job this would be doing this manually, this kind of analysis. But with some fairly simple rules, I think, as long as you have that future view of demand, which is what MRP does, then you could create that kind of system that manages quantities. And this is what we've seen companies doing, some of the best companies doing that. So their management of the Kanban system happens continually, but for those specific items that require it. So finally, last comment I want to make in terms of best practices, and this was mentioned in the previous lesson, but it's a quote from Taiichi Ohno, and it had to do with the image of a water strider, the insect that you see skimming around on top of the water, and that's a term that in lean circles is used to refer to the material handlers, water striders, or sometimes people say water spider. And the slogan is this: move quickly and carry a light load. So in terms of best practices, what you want to establish in terms of your ratio of inventory, let's just pick an individual item, but ratio of the inventory you have at the point of use, the max inventory, versus the frequency of delivering material as part of your regular material delivery route. That ratio should be between 6 and 8 to 1. So in other words, if you're delivering material every hour, you should count on having about 6 to 8 hours maximum of that inventory in that location. And if you can do that, then what you're doing is reducing the inventory that you have, the total inventory required at that location, to a very low level, but also shortage proofing the line, because you know that that delivery cycle is happening often enough to overcome just normal kind of variation in usage. So that's really the golden key to low inventories and shortage proofing the line. So frequent delivery cycles, you're not replenishing everything on every cycle, but small quantities delivered frequently. That's really the key. So I promise this is a crash course, a little bit like the SMED methodology. This is a single minute exchange of dies approach to talking about this issue of mixed model material management, but we'll leave it at that. Obviously, there's a lot to know on this subject. In fact, we teach a 3-day course on this, and there's all kinds of material on this subject. So this is just an appetizer, really, to get you excited about learning more about this topic and applying some of these methodologies. Now, we do have an opportunity for you if you want to take it to the next step. On May 9th through the 11th, 2017, we're going to be teaching a 3-day workshop hosted by Toyota Material Handling in Columbus, Indiana. So they've opened the doors for us. We're teaching this 3-day class on a lot of the same topics we've been just touching on in this particular crash course. And you'll have a chance to visit the Toyota factory tours, 2 of them as a matter of fact, and spend time with Toyota folks, to talk about exactly what they're doing, and spend time with us on this really fascinating and important topic. Because remember, for most companies, your biggest asset or your biggest controllable asset is going to be materials, right, on your balance sheet. Now, if you're someone like Apple or Microsoft, maybe it's cash is your biggest asset, but for most companies, it's materials. So getting this right is really important. So I'll leave it at that. And thank you for your attention, making it all the way through part 3 of this crash course. And we hope to do more of these in the future on other topics. So with that, we'll let you go. Thanks.